Yeah, but we got you see some of those towns with 36 inches.
In Maine?
Right on the New Hampshire.
Oh, yeah. That's crazy.
All right, welcome everybody to the March 15, 2023 Board of Selectmen meeting. I'd like to open up the floor for public comments for items not on the agenda.
I'll go.
All right.
As I think you guys know, I am going back to the Board of Appeals for our denied shoreland permit. The CEO denied our resubmittal of the shoreland permit. And before we get there, I want to bring to your attention that I've said it publicly before, but I do believe that the chairman of the Board of Appeals is biased against us. I think that we were denied our due process last time, and I think that she is biased, and I don't expect us to get a fair hearing if she is part of it. What I just brought to you was the emails, which is our Exhibit A in one of our lawsuits that we have. I want to call to your attention the second page in bold, written by Sam McLean in May of 2022. The McKees have not followed the zoning ordinance in multiple ways and have not been called to task for any of these violations. Since their lot is affected by shoreland zoning rules, it's particularly important that they follow all such rules precisely. When the town does not hold violators responsible, the only recourse neighbors have is to file a complaint with the Board of Appeals or file suit in a court of law. Unfortunately, I may soon have to exercise these options. So this is one example. It was an email written May 31st, 2022. Bob, you and Carol, you were on it along with planning board, town employees, and a bunch of our neighbors. So way before our November 3rd hearing, she's threatening to sue and to take us to the Board of Appeals. Okay, and then I was going through my records in the town office, and I found this letter from Sam McLean to you, the Board of Selectmen, where it's a big one, I don't know, 17 pages, but she says, do you know what it's like to experience a level of disrespect heaped on us by Mike McKee in particular, with his entirely and most likely unintentionally audible comments and asides? It was entirely within my discretion as the board chair not to allow him to disrupt our meeting. And may I add that it was the same level of disrespect with which he treated the entire process. He didn't take it seriously, just like he didn't take the hearing and the matters at issue in the appeal seriously. Both he and the CEO had their time for due process. How they use that time was entirely up to them. That's one paragraph. Then she cites me several other times. But interestingly enough, the last 3 pages are all dedicated to my deed. So I don't think that we are going to get a fair hearing with Sam McLean. I think that she is biased against us. I don't think she should be on this upcoming board hearing. Now I'm telling you because you're the Board of Selectmen and you're the ones who appoint these people to the boards, which means you also have the power to either unappoint or ask them to step aside for the benefit of the town. So it's in 2 weeks. I've now publicly notified you guys that I think we're not going to get a fair hearing, and I ask you to please consider it. Okay. If you need references, I gave you the emails. Some of you sure, and then the one I read, you guys all have a copy of this. So please read through it and think about it.
Okay. Well, thank you for the information. I'd like to get that other information also If you want, we can put it on the agenda, but we don't have a meeting scheduled before that other one. So
You have an executive session tonight where you can talk about it.
No.
we can't talk about her without her being here. So that's the thing, and we can't make any decisions right now on anything because it's not on the agenda. So.
Okay. Yeah, 2 weeks.
I realize this is public comment. Could I have permission to ask a question? So the existing Board of Adjustment and Appeals is 4 members. Is that accurate? And is one of those members presently in Florida?
Yep. As far as I know, yeah.
The reason I asked that question is this meeting's coming right up. And we don't even have a full appointed 5-board member for the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, which, as we know, is not the greatest of situations for people that need to be heard and decisions made through that body. And even if the chairperson of this board is allowed or participates in this meeting on the 29th, my point is, I hope that they're not down to 3 or potentially even 2, because I don't see how it could proceed. That's my point. So I think it would be good if the town found out if, I think Cheryl and Dave Stevens
They've
have
all
been.
been notified and have been in email communications about coordinating this meeting, and at no point in time have I been told that one or some are not planning to be there. So,
Okay, and I won't go on and on, but are we having any applications come in for any of the boards that are presently?
we have 2 applications that are on the executive session agenda for facilities committee. And then we have 1 applicant that came in that's going to be on the next agenda for
Road committee
road committee.
and board of adjustment.
Okay, thank you.
Carol?
Well, I just had one question. I believe Cheryl's out of town. Maybe she'll be back by the end of the month, but what is the, just so I understand, what's the policy for people attending remotely?
That is a policy, well, the remote participation policy is really designed around Board of Selectmen.
Okay,
But if there is, with the way that it's written, the participation policy is if one member is off the island, then it could be a remote participation meeting.
but does that not apply to the Board of Appeals?
Typically what would happen is if there aren't specific ones, according to legal, is if there isn't a specific one for each board, then they kind of adopt what the Board of Selectmen follow.
So,
So it would apply to them.
yeah, it seems like we should follow up and find out what the plan is.
Good.
Just for me personally, Mike, I wanted you to know that when I had concerns about this situation, I contacted Maine Municipal and asked them, their legal department, specific questions related to this. And there I was told that it's up to their board to decide whether or not that person has a conflict of interest or not. And I was told that it was not our jurisdiction per se. So.
Well, if you look at the agenda though, they don't give any comments, any ability for people to comment. So in the first round, Sam McLean said, I don't have a problem. And everyone else agreed that she didn't have a problem. Now, if I'd had a chance to speak, I could have at least identified to them what I thought the problem was. But if you don't open it up and let other people say whether or not, then it's beholden on the person who says it. And I don't think that was a fair and accurate assessment.
The Board of Appeals, the ordinance for the Board of Appeals speaks very clearly as to how that process works. They followed it. As Jen spoke with Maine Municipal, as I did as well. They followed the process as it's outlined in the ordinance. If we want to change the ordinance, then we can change the process. But they followed the process as per the ordinance. That's our job, is to follow the ordinances, not to change them when we think it's the right thing to do. That, a change of the ordinance has to go through town.
All right, well, our lawyers will be there and we'll discuss that. But you can't just blatantly say they follow the process, because the process is not well defined. And in that process, the public should have a chance to say, we think that person is biased.
Respectfully, it's not up to me or to you to decide what is the right thing to do. It is the language of the ordinance. So what you just said was the public should have the right. I may agree with you or not agree with you, but it really doesn't matter what I think. And in this case, what the ordinance says is what we have to follow.
Right.
All right. Anything else? Anybody else? All right, moving on. Town reports.
Town administrator report on this one, there's just a couple of things that were on here. So the first one was the audit. On March 8th, I heard back with hopes that they could get it to me by the end of the week. On the 9th, so late Friday afternoon, I got an email, and they had 2 more items that they needed following up on, one of which I didn't know what it was. So once I get clarification from them about that, and we get those documents to them, hopefully we'll have a final report soon. Any questions about that? Okay.
Yeah, so I just would ask that once you get it, you send it to us, not wait until the meeting, because it takes a while to go through. So once you receive it, if you just forward the copy on to us. So this is already this will be the final form that you get.
That's
And
the
you
idea,
had a
yes.
draft, and the draft was missing a ton of stuff, so,
Yes.
you know.
All right, any other questions on that?
Actually, yeah, I just want to agree with that. In general, I would like to have as much time as possible to read through these things, especially these complicated documents. So I want to weigh in on support of the person.
All right.
The next one is the Board of Adjustment Appeals application. So the town received from the McKees appeal denying CO's decision of the shoreline zone permit that they resubmitted. That's going to take place on Wednesday, March 29th here at 5 p.m. Notices were sent out on the 9th. And I believe this week, is that correct? The advertisement is posted in the newspaper. And then that application was attached for your information in the packet. The next item is the update on dredging. I've gone back and forth with a couple of emails with Army Corps, just kind of anxiously trying to get them to give us an update with the budget season coming up to see where we stand. I did get a phone call yesterday from Jordan, who is the individual who took over Mark Cable's position in the project. He briefly updated with me on what their plans are and what they roughly think the numbers are. I asked him to put it in an email to really break down what the numbers are, and he said he will have it to us within the next 2 weeks. I did provide him the time frame of our next budget meeting, so he is going to try to get that to us, so then I can properly adjust the numbers if needed based on that information.
Any questions?
Fire department have placed an order for a tent for the backup ambulance. The payment has been made, and it'll be shipped, and fire department will assemble it when it arrives. Stone work RFQs. Bob, Carol, and I have 3 interviews scheduled for tomorrow with the 3 different firms that had submitted the RFQs, and the plan is at this point to have it be an agenda item with the follow-up information for the April 5th meeting, which will be our next meeting. The December 23rd winter storm, we received an email from Cumberland County Emergency Management Administration, and well, Cumberland County, the state met the threshold for public assistance from the December 23rd storm. Cumberland County did not. So there will not be any FEMA money for any of the damages done from that. And then a couple other communications worth mentioning that did not get into the TA report. One is I just received an email. We have to do an annual workers' comp audit, so it's just something where on a smaller scale of like an audit, we have to submit them a bunch of payroll related details. So it's something that I did this year, something that I have to do this year that just takes up a day or two of my time. Caps Road, I've had some communications from Richard Hubble and Alexander Swafford. Alexander Zog Swafford, so they're involved in Caps Road drainage project. It's something that's been going on back to when Marjorie was here. There's a lot of deed changes among the residents that really need to be adjusted and changed before town does any kind of easement agreements. But regardless, I've had some communications with them since I've been in this position. And in the last week or two, they've kind of revisited the conversations with the town. I had forwarded some information to our attorney, but that it's going to require some time-consuming research on their part. And so I, at this point, told her to hold off unless she hears from me further. This has been a project that's been going on for years and years. And I have not responded to the two individuals, but I figured it'd be worth mentioning to you that my plan is to respond to them and just let them know that budget-wise, with the legal fees where we stand right now, that revisiting this is going to wait until July 1st when we really have the funds and the ability to put the time into it with the town attorney.
You said the communication came from Alexandra, and who was the other one?
Richard Hubble.
Rich Hubble, thank you.
So I know we have a line item for easements
In
Yes.
capital.
in the capital. So would that be a place that could come out of?
It could, I'd have to look at the language about it. I'm hesitant about going down the path of using, all of the different reserve accounts to pitch in for, legal expenses. But I mean, it's something that I can look into and see.
I think we agreed a couple of meetings ago to lean that direction on those kind of projects, to actually lean toward assigning legal expenses to the specific project for which they're related, and you're not an overall general kind of thing. So I would, if that's a way to keep the project moving, and if it gets to a point where you think you should bring an attorney back in to look at it, if they get to a point where you think it's time for the attorney to look at it, I would encourage us to use money from that capital reserve.
So you prefer I utilize the legal funds and then come to you for a vote to expend X amount of dollars out of the reserve accounts for the legal expenses?
Only after the work that you alluded to by Ms. Swafford and Mr. Hubble is finished, so that it's time to bring an attorney into it. If that comes back before the end of this fiscal year, then I would.
Well, it would be, so a lot of it is communications back and forth, and then them looking at deeds and doing things like that. So it wouldn't necessarily just be on one bill. It would be, probably over the course of a couple of months,
Yeah.
half an hour here, an hour here, an hour there. So.
I would just want to be clear what we think would be the town's responsibility and what we think would be those landowners' responsibility.
Well, and not to get into it too much, but their interest in what they want to do has slightly changed, which is why I kind of felt like that maybe for now, because of how much we have going on, pausing it until we have those funds to work with, to really dwell into it, might be.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and quite frankly, with the amount of time and effort that Rich Hubble and some of them and some of us on the town side, including Marjorie, have put into it, it's been very frustrating that it looked like it was going to almost be ready to go forward with a formal drainage easement and an agreement, and then, so.
But one of the things, Vic, I would encourage us not to spend any legal research or much conversation on it until that group, all of those landowners agree on a path, as opposed to us pouring more money into it. If they don't have consensus amongst them, I don't think we should put any more money into it at all.
Well, and that's because their direction has changed, though. I mean, it would really entail an executive discussion about real estate for me to.
Yeah.
So, but for now, in case if somebody comes to you and say, do you know about this? I didn't want it to be a surprise. It was kind of just,
Yeah, thanks.
the conversations have developed enough that it felt like it was a good time to pause for a couple months until we have more funds to work with.
Great. Jen, did you have something?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Larry?
That's what I had on this. So unless you have any other questions.
Do you want to talk about, some votes on this, or did you want to do that in communication?
Oh, I had that under communications, but we can mention it
Okay.
now. That's
No.
fine.
No, you have it under that, so let's leave it at that. Go ahead, Carol.
So, Vika, you said you were going to attend that GP cog thing on LD 23, 2003. So I was just wondering if you could give us an update from that.
It was just, it was another informative, kind of a slideshow update on where things stand and what the process is, so.
But I mean, I guess the primary question, because Bob and I have different takes on it, is whether the town needs to take any action in terms of their zoning ordinances.
I think that would be a question that would be wise asking a legal opinion on, because I think that there are towns that say, wait until the date, like we had talked about a couple of weeks ago, to see what the changes are going to be, or there are going to be specific warrant articles. So with this particular one, I have a note when it comes time to having the town warrant go to the attorney for revisit. I have a question to ask about whether we need to put a specific warrant article about this particular issue.
But I mean, we would have to have a public hearing on a zoning change. So I mean, you couldn't just put it on the warrant. That's my question. And I know when I went to the public hearing, that came up as a concern, because some towns have already gone, are going through town meeting. So did they give you any indication? Because right now the implementation date is July 2023.
I don't feel like I got any kind of direction. I think it's pretty much based on each town and what they choose to do. That's kind of my take on it, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, at the public hearing, they made it sound, I mean, that's where Bob and I have kind of different impressions. So I guess we can follow up. I don't want to waste any more time now, but it doesn't, it sounds like we need to get some clarity on that. But just to be aware, the way I understand it, it was a zoning updates, which would, and this is what towns were saying, then it would require a public hearing. It's pretty hard for towns, for us to implement it even, we'd have to start pretty quick.
Right. And the impression I've gotten from talking to different lobbying kind of people that are involved with Genesis and places like that is that, and also from the material we got from Ryan Fecto's office originally, is that unless there's any legislation that occurs between now and July 1, it goes into effect July 1, as they decided last year. If, my understanding is that if there are no changes to it, then it goes into effect regardless of what we do. And our mess at that point is if somebody appeals to build something that's allowed under LD 2003, but not allowed under our zoning ordinance, LD 2003 wins, and we have to kind of clean up the mess between those disagreeing documents. But it was specifically written, it's actually stated, I believe, in the legislation that it overrides home rule. This is not a home rule issue. This legislation trumps home rule or our local ordinances. So that's where Carol and I are in two different places from hearing from two different parties, which is why it would be good to get legal clarification at some point. I don't know if this is the time to spend that money or not. I think we might want to wait a bit before we spend that money
Well,
tapping into our attorney's opinion, but.
But the public MMA.
Maybe something MMA might be able to clarify in general.
Yeah,
the public hearing on the rules was just last week. So once they finalize the rules, we should have a better
Yeah.
understanding. And in that public hearing, they were recommending that communities, I guess, we're not, Bob and I aren't totally in conflict. What they were suggesting is towns amend their zoning ordinances to incorporate these changes. They can add additional protections that can't reduce the density. They can't increase it, reduce the density, but they can do other things like adopt a seasonal rental unit ordinance, which almost every town has done that has it in place. So I think that's a separate conversation, but I just wanted to find out what Vika learned from her webinar on that.
All right. Any other questions? Anything else, Vika?
Moving on to regular business, 23-017, they hear an update from the planning board. And I see John out there.
Yeah, I guess first I had to turn my back on people who yell over their heads. Oh, I'll turn my back on. Sorry. I am very apologetic for that. Our meeting was Monday night, so I couldn't get things into the packet. But this serves kind of as the, let's call it our annual report. And within that, I mentioned two ordinances, the growth management ordinance and the planning board ordinance, that both have been edited. And those I will get to so she can disseminate to all of you, along with a copy of this. And I'm hoping you can maybe accept this report tonight, which I'm going to present orally, and then look at the ordinance edits and see if they can make it onto town warrant. And do that at a later time, I guess. So if you'll bear with me and read along. Currently, we have 5 members: Paul Lester and Julian, Kyle Kerber, Travis Nato, and myself. Recently, the board lost Esther Danielson to retirement, which was regrettable for us because her input and wisdom will be sorely missed. With diverse backgrounds and skill sets, the remaining members make up a good team. We're willing to work towards creative and thoughtful decisions and solutions. With only 5 members, however, the planning board is below membership level specified by ordinance of 7. A required quorum of 4 is potentially problematic with our low numbers, although it hasn't been a problem to date. The board meets monthly at the hall, generally the second Monday of each month, to conduct ongoing business that includes reviewing the CEO's reports to try and stay in touch with construction and development on the island. The board has not been called on to conduct project hearings, site walks, or site plan reviews during the past year. One private peer project application did come before us. We reviewed it, but then the application was withdrawn, requiring no further action at the time being. One issue that arose from reviewing that project was that it might be helpful for us if, in particular for peers, the applicants got DOE and Corps of Engineer approval prior to coming to the town, so that we don't go through the whole process, approve a pier only to have DOE or the Corps turn it down, and then we have to go back and start over again.
DOE.
DEP, DEP, yeah.
By the way, please interrupt me. Question. Sorry, thank you. Well done. Both the growth management and planning board ordinances were edited and will be submitted to the select board for inclusion on the town meeting warrant for public approval. Edits were unanimously approved by the planning board. Growth management ordinance edits were minor, primarily typographical in nature, elimination of some irrelevant dates stemming from it being written around the time of secession, and some minor clarifying words. Biggest change was to remove the $100 fee from the ordinance and suggest placing that fee on the select board schedule fees, and therefore its level to be determined by the select board. Planning board ordinance also received some attention for clarity and consistency, and a few such minor edits were made. A line was added permitting the board the option to meet via publicly accessible electronic media. This would make legal the remote meetings necessitated by the recent pandemic. More important were the changes made to the ordinances section on membership. Encouraged by the ongoing challenges of recruiting community members to serve on town boards. The required full staffing level is dropped in the edits from 5 to 5 from 7, and the quorum to 3 from 5. I think we can get the work done with that number of people. I don't see that as being an issue, but to actually find 7 people and to guarantee we'll have a 4-person quorum is potentially a challenge, continues to be a challenge. Membership qualifications were changed to permit the select board to consider Maine residents, not only island residents, in line with Maine statute. Regardless, it would be required that no non-resident be appointed unless 4 members were already island residents. Also added was the option for the select board to appoint 2 additional non-voting associate members who could serve as alternates to satisfy quorum requirements in the case of either member absence or the need for recusal. Full authority over board appointments remains with the select board. One of the thoughts about associate members was that we might be able to find people who would be willing to participate, be aware, but not be full-time board members, but still be on call if need be to take a member's place.
So I'm just curious about the quorum. You state that it's going to be quorum requirements, but they're going to be non-voting. So how is that?
Non-voting until they're asked to step into the shoes of a voting member.
Okay.
And that would be at the discretion of the chair.
All right.
And I think, if I recall, in other towns, for them to be in a decision-making role for, say, an application, they have to have attended for the full application process.
Right.
Right.
Right. That would, yeah, I don't think in all fairness, it would be inappropriate for somebody to be brought in at the last minute just to
Right.
be able to vote. Yeah.
But is there language in there now?
There's no language for that.
I'm sure it's out there. You can find it.
Yeah.
But John, the recommendation for the ordinance change is to go from 7 to 5 members?
That's right.
Okay.
And this may seem like a stupid question, but there needs to be a public hearing before this can be put on the town warrant, right?
Is that the process?
Yeah, and there's a timeline that's kind of strict, and, I mean, you have plenty of time, but it's,
We've talked about it before, there's like a 30-day, I have it on my calendar about, when the advertisement would need to take place to follow line, because that's what happened last year, it kind of was brought up, you know, and we weren't meeting the timeline, and so that's why we had met, like, 6 months ago or so you guys could really dwell into it.
Yeah, that was for the prior warrant articles, I think, but yes.
right,
And so I'll count on working with you to make sure that we meet all the requisite timelines. Assuming that the board wants to move these on to the warrant. Any other questions on? Moving on to other larger scale projects. One includes updating the comprehensive plan, and the other is to rewrite or at least significantly edit the zoning ordinance. The comprehensive plans were originally envisioned by the state to be updated every 10 years, but then the LePage administration made sure that there was no longer a planning office, so that rendered this requirement somewhat inoperative. But updating remains a good idea. The board discussed updating, decided to, rather than do a full-blown rewrite of the 200-page document, to create a simple, user-friendly, relatively brief summary document that reviews and validates the basic premises and priorities of the 2011 plan, establishes a timeline and methodology to, at some point, fully update the comprehensive plan, restates the important goals and priorities of the original in a simpler format, reviews accomplishments, and highlights the remaining issues that need to be worked on with suggested strategies to achieve completion.
John,
Yes.
question on that topic. And Vika may be able to help here. I think at one point, and maybe still, there are some state funding opportunities. I don't remember whether they're grants or what they are, but state funding opportunities that even though the tenure, even though having a comp plan is no longer required, there are funding opportunities that are not available to towns that don't have a comprehensive plan. So my question would be, would this kind of an update, if we have a comp plan and it's over 10 years old, can we still get that grant money or no, would be question one. And if not, then would this update satisfy that requirement? There is a. what is
I
Shelley-
think so, because our plan is certified,
Yes,
and then the state planning office is disbanded.
so they can't.
So
use it.
we're on the list of certified plans.
Right.
So I think it makes sense to do a limited update, but I think we're okay in terms of,
Grant money. Okay. What is Hannah Pingree office called?
office of GOPIF, government, what is it? Governor's Office of Innovation and whatever.
Technology?
Yeah,
No,
I don't
yeah.
know.
So her office could probably answer those questions pretty easily.
Okay.
Thanks.
That seems like a good strategy.
Yeah.
And I say it's good, so it must be okay, right? Documents underway should be completed this spring. I hope within the next month. Board did not perceive a need for town meeting approval as the update summary nature won't change the basic premises or themes of the 2011. It'd be fine to present it or disseminate it. It just, I don't think it needs to go to town meeting.
One option you might want to consider that's been done with a few other topics like the sea level rise study would be to append it officially to the comp plan,
Yeah.
but that does require a town meeting vote.
Great.
So it's a pretty simple vote.
Okay.
I'm not saying you must do that, I'm saying think about it.
Yep. The larger and more complex task facing the board, obviously, is a rewrite of the zoning ordinance. Important issues identified and discussed to date include the zoning districts, which perhaps need revision, or even combination. We're considering combination into a single unified island district. The lists of permitted uses can be restricted. Perhaps it would be good for greater flexibility and authority for proposed use review by either both the appeals and planning boards. The another issue is the incorporation of LD 2003 state mandated zoning requirements into the document, or at least to be consistent with those mandates. And to review and revise subdivision requirements. The potential for incorporation of open space subdivision elements, perhaps even replacing the major subdivision with a set of cluster development open space requirements. So those are the kind of paths we're taking right now in looking at the zoning ordinance. That effort will take up at least this coming year and will involve seeking both public and official input during the process. And eventually, of course, town meeting approval. While unknown, there will likely be legal or consulting expenses associated with these efforts, in particular the zoning rewrite, zoning ordinance rewrite. So I'm asking that it's advisable that we retain the amount budgeted for the planning board for this upcoming fiscal year in case such funds are needed.
Are you talking about the amount before our last budget meeting or the amount after our last budget meeting?
No, I know neither.
It's okay.
I'm willing to take the lead, and I do not have a figure.
Well, one piece, so LD 2003 has a separate portion which includes funding for zoning ordinance updates for small communities. So I think we should take advantage of that.
Does it still have that? I thought the last
Yeah,
time I
no,
thought it
it's-
got edited out.
No, it's still in there as of the public hearing. So, and I think that would be a great opportunity to kind of use that process to update the full-blown thing. We tried that once. It was really painful and unsuccessful. So I think we learned something, hopefully, that we won't repeat.
Which, excuse me, when Carol says we tried that one, she means we tried rewriting the entire ordinance all at one fell swoop with the help of the consultant.
It was tough. So anyway, I think there'll be money available to supplement what we have. And that should be available in our fiscal year 20.
My initial read of LD 2003 was that we could receive something like up to $25,000
Right.
in funds. And then the next time I looked at the final bill, it was gone. So
It's in the rules, so I think it's
in
still
the
there.
rules,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So I think that'd be
I'll check
helpful.
on the elusive $25,000. And that's really all I have to.
So just updating you from our last budget, we changed your line item from consulting and lawyer, I guess.
Consulting and legal. Yeah.
Legal?
Legal and consulting, what you said.
So now we changed the consulting and lowered it to 3,000,
Okay.
and then unified the legal services all in one. So basically, you have to come ask us to spend money either way, so you want to hire a lawyer, you have to come ask us to hire a lawyer anyway, so.
It could be a simple memo or request through the town administrator that doesn't require coming physically to the meeting. In my opinion.
Yeah,
And then just so you're aware, you may be aware, we're doing a groundwater study this summer. And one of the objectives for that is to look at the so-called carrying capacity, soil limitations in certain areas of the town that might relate to, potential densities or saltwater intrusion problems, things like that. So that might be useful information in reviewing the zoning. The last time that was done, it was in 1988, and that is where our 1.5 acre lot size came from. was a sort of a density recharge calculation. So we'll look at that again, but I think that might be a good basis for sort of, you know,
When is that likely to?
we'll be doing that over the summer. The report should be done by the end of 23 calendar year, right?
Mark,
John, have you guys been able to meet monthly?
Yes, we had 1 month off when I had COVID, and other than that.
And I'm sorry, is it the third Thursday? or-
Second Monday of the month.
Okay, I get it all mixed up. Not that I'll make the meeting, but if I see zoning ordinance discussions, I could show up.
They'll be happening, so please.
okay,
And you talked about, changing the membership qualifications. How is it currently? I mean, besides it's 7 members, is it just island residents? Do island residents have to be here for a certain amount of
Our
time?
current ordinance says, I forget the exact language, but it does require that you be should be a resident.
Mhm.
The state requires that you be a US citizen over 18 and a Maine resident. So, yeah, obviously nobody who doesn't have a residence in the state of Maine could, under the edited version, would be able to be on the board. And again, yeah, so that's the only real difference.
So you don't necessarily have to live here for over a year, or 6 months or something like that.
No, and I kind of assume, given the language that stays the same, that the select board has the authority to decide who should be on the planning board, not just on the basis of the application and meeting those 3 criteria, but any other reasonable criteria that they deem appropriate. So if somebody were just walked in the door and said, wow, I'm really interested, and they've, never been to the island before, you probably would have a good reason to say, wait a while.
Yeah, couple things. One, thank you for doing all this. This is all great stuff. Glad you're doing it all now that I'm not on the planning board. Vika may know the answer to this question. You don't mention on here the 3 formerly repeatedly proposed zoning ordinance changes that didn't quite make it through the right process. I assume those are still on track. I know you and Vika have been working on getting those to town meeting in the proper way this time. But a question, Vika, could the notices in the paper and the public hearing combine all of these changes into one public hearing? Could the notice say, this hearing will be about these proposed changes in such fashion that we save money on postings, but have one public hearing instead of, I think that'd be a really good way to do it. And so,
Yeah, if the growth ordinance gets done, and then the zoning ordinance is done, we could advertise, public hearing, they'll be on this ordinance and that ordinance and that ordinance, and do it all at once.
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, ideally, that would be what the office staff would prefer to.
Right. Just thank you for all this. Really appreciate it. Carol?
So just to recap, for the planning board, you're proposing to change the membership size from 7 to 5.
Yep.
And then do I read this correctly? So out of those 5 members, 1 could be a non-island resident?
Could be, yep.
Right, but
But no more.
only 1?
Yeah, as it's written, tortuously written, if the select board were to consider a non-resident applicant, there would have to be 4
Okay,
existing island members on the board.
And we do have other boards that do have that requirement. I think planning board is more specific in lines with the selectmen, where you need to be a resident, physical resident in the community versus, just like a taxpayer and non-official residents.
right, it's a quasi judicial board like the Board of Appeals, and that's more typical to require people to be a resident, but I understand your recommendation.
Well, yeah, what the ordinance actually says at this point is members shall be residents of the town of Chesapeake Islands. doesn't really define what resident means in this case. Within the town, we're using a couple different definitions at this point as to what that means. But that's all it says, but then the next sentence is, the selectmen may establish additional uniform and lawful criteria for appointment to the planning board. And by lawful, I assume they're referring to that state legislation that John was talking about that allows anyone in the state of Maine, but it doesn't go any further on that topic. So my assumption is we can always be more restrictive than the state. We can't be less restrictive. We can't allow residents of New Hampshire, for example.
Right.
That would violate the state.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, anything else? Mike has a question.
Yeah, just a comment. So you were asking, planning board is asking to open this up to someone who's not an island resident. And yet, one of the considerations is how long you've been an island resident. No, it's not. When I applied to be on the planning board, the letter of rejection I got from the board of selectmen was that I had just gotten here. And so I should wait until I've lived here for a while, better understand the island, and then reapply. So while you're complaining that you don't have enough members on the planning board, there are people, qualified people. I was the chairman of the Utilities Commission, Stafford County, Virginia. I understand how to read.
Excuse me, just a second, but this is executive, we shouldn't be having this conversation. It should
Ah,
only be an executive session.
okay. Thank you.
And there's rules we have to follow about those kind of conversations. Am I right in saying that this conversation would be appropriate in executive session?
Kind of borderline, yeah.
We asked for a comment. I was making a comment.
Understood.
All right, anything else? Yes.
John, is there consideration to the sea level rise vulnerability study and the zoning or the thinking about the rezoning of the island?
I think I've heard it mentioned that we had, the sea level study was that not appended to the comprehensive plan?
It was.
Okay, so again, everything we're doing with respect to zoning and zoning ordinance. Obviously, we listen to everybody, but we take some amount of direction from the comprehensive plan. Given that that's in there, we'll absolutely incorporate that in our, in the never-ending struggle with the zoning ordinance.
I think another answer to Pam's question has to do with the reference point for high tide. I believe we've changed that to HAST as opposed to mean high tide or something like that. So I think it now refers to highest annual tide, which is a state definition which changes every year. It's an annual calculation, whereas in the past, it was more of a reference point that was static. And that's a change that has been made, I think, Carol, was that by the state?
No, we made it.
We made that change, okay. So that's in there. If that helps answer your question.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate the consideration. We're looking at a vastly changed shoreline, vastly changed. So I appreciate the consideration and forethought.
All right, anything else? All right, thank you very much, John.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'll make a point of getting the edited ordinances to the, so you can distribute them.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the next, 23-018, to hear an update on Union Island and take any necessary action. Bob, do you want to take this?
Sure. Yes. I'll start and you can jump in. We met with the group of two parties, two members of the land trust, 2 members of Indian Island Company, and 2 members of the planning board, being Bo and me, a couple days ago. We had been waiting for Indian Island Company to come back with their members' input and decisions on what they wanted to do. And they, on a lot of these topics, have a lot of say because it's their land, it's private land. And I think there's a couple of points. They gave a presentation, which I think will be on the packet for tonight's meeting as of tomorrow. First bullet point in the packet, back in May of 2021, when we first met with the site and DEP, we all thought that we could and should repair the seawall to keep the road operational. Then they talk about some other things that happened, and then they, in their fourth bullet point, 2 storms at the beginning and end of 2022 have brought home to us, meaning IIC, the reality of rising sea levels and climate change. And because of that, and as a result of all these conversations we've had, their conclusion is that they would like a walking model. In other words, they do not want to move the parking area from where it currently, from where it used to be, before it got overwashed, which was right next to the deeded access path. That's part of the agreement between CCLT and ISC. So the proposal had been to move that parking area uphill to the base of the hill on the shoreward side of the road. And their membership has chosen not to go along with that. And their reasons were, the topics, the themes that they listed as their reasons for wanting to move toward a wilder, less developed situation down there. Talked about things like adaptation, a walking model instead of a driving model, preserving access, focusing on conservation values. And then they wanted to focus now on safety for the access down there, both in terms of parking, which they are now assuming that the parking will remain at the top of the hill the way it was temporarily last summer. So they also made the statement that they, from their understanding, the town no longer has any responsibilities or agreements below the road, basically, with them deciding that it's not going to be a road, but rather a walking path. If you look at the language of the agreement that was between the town and IIC in the past, the way they read it, and I would say I read it the same way, the town no longer has responsibility down there. So their direction is that both the public and IIC members, and I think this would approach or apply to the Indian Island Association members as well, would have walking access to the access point down where the path through the dune grass used to be. And I'm sorry, the public would have walking access to that path. And IIC and IIA members would have walking access to that path and walking access beyond that point across the private part of things all the way to the boathouse, but no vehicular access down that road. So that was their decision. There was a lot of conversation about how nice it would be to be able to have parking down there, but how all 6 of us recognize that it's their call to make, and that they went through a pretty involved process with a lot of painful conversations to get where they got to. So there are a couple of questions for the select board to consider. And, does the select board want Bo and Bob, the 2 members of the select board who have been working on this, to continue working with a group of 6, if there is still a group of 6 going forward, on things like access? Or do we want to just let CCLT and IIC work on access, which is covered by their agreement? And there are some things they'll have to consider in terms of the appropriateness and safety of that access. CCLT spoke clearly about how they want to make sure it's a safe access that meets their requirements under their agreement with IIC. So a choice the select board needs to make is, do you want Bob and Bo to continue working with those other 2 parties on access, or let them work on the access and just kind of stay posted? And then the second question is, does the select board want town of Shabig to continue or get further involved in parking at the top of the road? So our management of parking is not very active, except at the Stone Pier and to a lesser degree Chandler's. The parking alongside the road there, we don't know exactly where the town's right of way ends on the side of that road and where the private property begins. It looks pretty clearly like where we were parking last year was on private property of the family that is the heirs to Sam and Sally, and of, to a lesser degree, Corky and Carla Clark's property. To determine exactly where that lands and what possibilities there might be, we would need to survey. So we could try to engage those two landowners in a conversation about parking, or we could just say, park along the side of the road like we do in other places and see what happens. It is at times a concentrated area. I've seen as many as 10 cars parked on the side of the road there last summer. Often those cars have children in them, so it is a public safety concern. But those are two questions that this board needs to consider. Miss anything, Bo?
No, I think that's it. Mark, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bob. My opinion is, I think there's probably some value in continuing being involved in even how the access footpath is developed. Even though we will have no physical ownership, certainly, and maybe not even, I would think we would have an easement, but I'm not sure how that would break down, but probably not.
It's up to you if you want us, if you want us to pursue to have an easement with them, basically it would cover who takes care of what and does that.
So I don't know the answer to that.
Right.
I don't want to get into the weeds. No pun
But
intended.
continue involved.
But my opinion is there's probably some value in continuing a discussion even with the footpath access, because I think the community is going to be interested in what we present to them or not. And as far as the parking up at the top of the road, I agree, it's probably going to end up at least partially, if not wholly, onto some private property. But the access in and out is back onto public way. And I think the town of Shabig needs to do a better job. This board is responsible for parking and traffic ordinances and management thereof. And I'll take part of the blame for the first 14 plus years of this town. We've done quite a poor job with it. I think we can improve in that area without being too hard on the public. But I think helping develop how that parking is situated and how it accesses in and out of the public way certainly is the responsibility of the town once it comes back onto the public way. So I think there's some value in staying involved in both of these.
Okay, thank you, Carol.
Yeah, and I would just agree with that. And I think we can explore whether it would make sense for us to enter into an agreement for an easement. I'm not, since CCLT has an easement, I'm not sure it's necessary, but there may be some benefit, similar to how we sort of do the parking lot over there. But I think we have an obligation to help manage the parking, and maybe we're gonna need to develop sort of a parking plan for that area that is part, and then becomes part of our parking ordinance.
Good.
Yeah, I agree with both Mark and Carol in that, it was definitely in the best interest of the island to continue to have access, and that was never in question, in my opinion. It was how and what it was going to be. And so to stay involved is important, I think. I just wonder, I mean, we have a pretty significant amount of money in that capital line, and I just wonder if that is necessarily because what it was for originally, if it needs to all be used for something to do, with that specific thing, or how we can change that. spread the wealth a little bit further, maybe. If that makes any sense.
Well,
Yeah, one possibility, but we had already talked about how we needed to retitle that particular fund. And possibly to change the amount of it. Those are both town meeting questions. Certainly, some of that money could pass the straight face test being used for enhanced parking up at the top. One thing about parking I neglected to mention, 6-8 years ago, there were 5 spots down below, and if people were following the rules, once those 5 spots were filled, nobody else drove down there. Occasionally people did, but if there were 5 down there, then overflow was up at the top. What we had last summer was 5 spots up at the top with really no place for overflow other than just being barely off the road. So I didn't want to say this before others had a chance to weigh in, but I do agree that we ought to do something, try to do something with the help, cooperation of the abutters, the landowners who own that land, which is not IIC, it's 2 private parties, to try to come up with a safe and publicly beneficial parking setup.
Are those landowners part of IIC?
One of them, if I'm not mistaken, is a member of the IIA. IIC goes back to the original landowners. IIA is a group that bought into the right to use the boathouse, which is now harder to use.
Indian Island Association, Indian Island Company.
Yeah, and then the other landowner, I know the parents were part of IIC. I don't know if the next generation is or not. I assume they are. But IIC itself can't negotiate with us about those properties in terms of the land. That's the individual property owners.
so Bob, real quick, so your yes about the parking, what about the communication and meeting?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to do.
Okay. All right, Mark.
I'll be quick. Maybe we can find out and determine, maybe we know the rod width of that section of North Road where it connects right there. The only reason I say that is if parking is developed there, at least we'll know the town owns to here, and then it's private. And I would encourage you and possibly the members of the Indian Island Corporation to think outside the box about what direction people can park, maybe be more efficient with the system.
Agreed.
And I know I don't know if it was last year, it had to be last year, that you looked into it a little bit when we started first started parking on the side of the road. So, and the road was pretty near, close to what it is now, the paved area. So,
Yeah, the information that I found said that North Road was, I believe, I'm going off of memory here, 22 feet. And then it was questionable where North Road ended and where the other road started. And then when I had shared the information in a public meeting discussion, Don and David had emailed me with some deed information and brought a whole stack of very old written deeds and cursive writing that are difficult to understand, saying that this information determines that it's actually 49.5 feet. So it's questionable, just like a lot of the other roads that we have. North Road could be as wide as 49.5 feet. The information that I have says 22. So similar to Bennett's Cove discussion, I think the most realistic way that you're gonna get that information, like Carol said, is gonna be a survey. The most questionable part is, where one ends and one starts, because there's a drastic width difference between those. And the plan that we came up with last year was, the property owners were aware and Indian Island had talked to them, so they were definitely notified and aware of the process that was taking place.
all right, so I'm personally in agreement with the parking. I think the town needs to start with a survey of what exactly we own and then move on to talking to the landowners with a proposal. Whether we get an easement from them or buy the land from them or whatever the steps may be that they did want to go. As far as communication with the land trust and IIC, I see a value of being in the loop. But as far as being in the communications between them, I don't see the value of it because we're falling down to their agreement. Unless we want to pursue an agreement with them. So, but that's my opinion. So, Bob.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify what my answer to you earlier on that front as well. IIC offered to be part of the conversations about parking if there was any way they could help. They didn't see any way they could help, but they were willing to be part of it. And I would encourage us in terms of the work that's going on the path, be it legal work or physical work, that we stay in touch with it. I didn't mean to say that I think the group of 6 is going to continue. That ad hoc committee had a very specific role, and I think everybody on the committee thinks that role's over. The concept of what do we do to maintain public access, to find common ground on what we do to maintain public access down there. I think that group has done what they intended to do. So I agree with Bo. We should stay in touch with the folks from IIC and the folks from CCLT and offer to help if we can on that front. But I don't think the group of 6 is going to keep meeting per se. Separately, I do think the town should begin looking at parking and public safety in that area post haste. I think the first thing we have to do is determine whether, and if so, when we can use any of the money from that current capital budget item for something like a survey. We may need to go to town meeting for a vote on that first.
Don't know what the wording is in the actual wording of it.
It's pretty
Yeah,
specific.
I would suspect that getting a survey of North Road and, Cottage Road wouldn't fall into.
Unless it says access.
Let me, pull it up.
Carol.
Given that this is a change from maybe what some people envisioned,
Right.
I think we should, somehow inform the community before we start spending money on another direction. So I think there needs to be kind of a communication to the community.
I agree with that.
Okay, would it hurt to get a quote for
No, I think we should, the next step is to kind of, as Bob said, your job is done. I think the next step besides the select board meeting is to communicate that to the community. Maybe in, the monthly calendar or however you want to do it, but
That's a good point.
some way. Because I think, this is a different direction and I don't think we should start on that direction until we at least let people
Right.
know where we're at. And I also think we want to make sure people understand this was a combined joint decision. It isn't just the town that made the decisions.
it? So we do a workshop for the town meeting or before?
Maybe town meeting's a good time to kind of summarize what happened, yeah?
So,
Probably the best place.
general.
Who was, can I ask who the group of 6 were, besides you and Bo?
From IIC, it was Ted Ballard and Ted Morse, the 2 Teds. And from CCLT, it was Diane Lukacs and Penny Asherman. Penny's the former chair of that board and has now become the executive director. So she's a staff person now. That was the group the whole time we met. And it was a good group to work with. One other point that I wanted to make though, I think at least some members of the group, when we had our meeting the other night, were quite concerned about how this information was going to get out to the community. It's one reason we didn't talk about this before tonight. This only a couple of days ago that we met, but that gave CCLT and IIC, who stayed on the call after we got off, a little bit of time to plan how they were going to share the information, in particular CCLT with their constituents. I wouldn't be surprised if it's on their social media tomorrow or something like that. So word will be out there. Clearly folks are listening tonight. But to Carol's point, I think it really needs a good discussion before we spend any money getting a quote for the survey and trying to get on some surveyor's schedule might be a good thing to do without actually spending the money.
Well, and the Bennettsville Road, excuse me, that was months and months before they got around to that, so at least putting it.
Yeah.
Maybe in the same person's ear wouldn't be a bad idea, because it could be, July or August before a survey is even available to be done.
And I don't mean to be cheap, but I'll be cheap for a moment. I guess I would like to know how necessary it's going to be to have a full-fledged, formal survey done of that road, or will it be fairly easy, in our opinions, from the town and the neighbors affected to come to some sort of an agreement?
Good question. But what I would say is, with that thought in mind, before executing any kind of agreement with the abutters, the landowners, a survey would definitely be required.
Right.
But
Maybe.
to explore the topic with them without doing the survey, with just some simple sketches that are not scaled, not referenced to center points and all that kind of thing, just to see if they're interested, that could be a really positive thing to do.
Well, that's really my only suggestion here, because it may be required to go into more of a legal process at some point, or recommended. But before we do that, I'd just like to know what the feelings are and the vibes are. That's all I'm saying.
Kara?
Yeah, and I would just, encourage you to just have a conversation before you even go forward with any kind of sketches.
Yeah.
I think we basically know we need to control the parking there. There's different options. And the first thing would to be explore how amenable they'd be to, expanding or, whatever, the parking. And I think in fairness to them, that's the first question.
Go ahead.
No.
If the board wants me to, I know both of those parties pretty well. I'd be happy to be part of a group of two, having a conversation with those two parties, if that's what the board wants us to do.
That's good.
Could I ask who that is?
Corky and Carla, kind of on the uphill. And the children of the Ballards,
Ballard?
Sam and Sally's kids. There's a trust involved. I think it involves all three kids.
What I would suggest also is, to just get it out to the public first and to say, this is where it has, and, it can be from the group of six.
Right.
This is who's figured it out, and, put it on website, put it on in the newsletter, and just say, this is what's going on, so the public doesn't freak out that it's, not, giving access or something.
Yeah, and I would emphasize that it come from the group, so that, sort of a press release from the three parties that says, this is what we've done, this is what we've decided, and, it kind of, the language is agreed to by all three parties, and you kind of come up with that. I think, so I would say our work is done once we can, do that, because I think it's going to be important to kind of make it clear that it was a, unified agreement.
We can ask. Yep.
Yeah.
So do you want to ask what we do?
Either one sends an email. Okay. We'll set up another Zoom and.
Yeah.
All right, any other comments?
Thank you for working on that. I think it's a good outcome personally. I mean, I appreciate.
It's not the outcome we all wanted, but it is an outcome, and I'm happy we came to some kind of agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good process.
Yes. Yeah. So as it stands, we will talk through the group and get some wording on the press release, get the information out to the public. And then we talk to the landowners after that's done. And then move on from there. Sound good? All right. Anything else? Anything from the public? Moving on. 23-019, begin the research and discussion of consulting with a grant writer and take any necessary action. I'll hand this off to Vika.
So I just put a couple things in your packet about this. Last year, you guys, were the board at the time asked me to reach out to the school and CDC to see who, and if they use anybody for grant consulting. So I had attached those. What I also did is I had reached out to JP Cog and Island Institute. And JP Cog came back with the 3 names that I attached in this. With Island Institute, I got bounced back to somebody, and then somebody else was gonna get back to me, and I was told if I didn't hear back to let them know, and then they would follow up, and I haven't had a chance to follow up with them in the last couple of days with that, but these are the names that I've collected, and I guess I need your direction where you wanna go with it.
All right,
I would suggest that we follow an RFQ process similar to what we're doing for the sea level rise study for the stone field. Much abbreviated. Hopefully the packets that come back will be a lot less detail and fluff. But I think having a couple of select board members plus our town administrator interviewing 3 after whatever number of them we choose to send in a statement of qualification would be an appropriate path to follow. And then let that group of 3 people come back to this board with a recommendation for which one to go with.
okay. Jen?
How do we pay for this? Is this a stipend position? Is this a full-time position? Is this where's it coming out of that we pay for something like this?
You haven't had any discussion about.
So that's my
Monday.
overall discussion question.
Sure.
And I have a question, sort of the same question, and I think this would be on an as-needed basis if we had a particular program or project that we were seeking grant funds for, then we might hire this individual. I would not support hiring them on any kind of permanent or salaried or stipend position. I don't think that's how it's typically done anyway. I think it's usually as needed. Just like if we needed an engineer, we had a list of engineers, we hire them,
Isn't it a percentage on?
Sometimes.
Sometimes, but I think normally in Maine, for small towns like us, it would be an hourly rate to help with a grant application. And I'm not clear what you're looking for. You're looking for both research on grant opportunities and grant preparation.
Yeah, grant research, preparation, writing, whatever, whatever grant.
I guess I would
When you get the
encourage
grant,
the town to do town staff, which I think we had this conversation with the fire department. It isn't hard to find the grant opportunities. I mean, and the ones for the fire department are pretty obvious. And I think we have an administrative assistant that we assigned that to a couple meetings ago. So I think if then an opportunity is identified and they want help preparing something, I would say you got to also look at the ratio of the cost of the grant assistance to the value of the grant. And if it's a $10,000 grant, I'm not sure we want to hire a grant writer. If it's a $150,000 grant, yeah, maybe. So I think there has to be kind of a process if we're going to go this route.
Well,
Yeah.
oh, sorry.
Do we have grants on a list that we've talked about that we currently want to apply for?
Not that I know of.
So I think in these meetings, we've talked a couple times about, oh, we should look into grants for that. I would suggest that the first thing we need to do is start keeping a list of those. Once we get to the next step with the stone pier, clearly we'll want to be talking about grants for that. But I think to Carol's point, this is not something we want, I think some organizations do have a stipend relationship that is then supplemented on an hourly basis or a percentage basis with an ongoing relationship with the grant writer. I don't think we want to do that. And this list is great. And I think we should start maintaining a list of what grants we might go after. And then when we have one that we are ready to go after, then either at that point, we have some RFQ kind of conversations with this list of people, or maybe we have those conversations in advance, just so we have one or two names to go to up front. The other thing that's going to happen is some of these people are going to be stronger in transportation grants and others are going to be stronger in working waterfront grants or whatever. So it might make sense to wait until to keep this list in front of ourselves, but to start collecting a list of grants that we want to go after and then take action on a grant by grant basis.
So are you saying basically the federal government's putting out this specific grant, so then we hire that grant writer to do that? Or we have a specific project like the Stone Pier and go, okay, we need you to research on what kind of federal, state, whatever money we can get for this project and apply for those grants?
Yep.
Okay. Carol?
Yeah, and I just want to say that the Island Institute will provide some support along those lines at no cost to the community. So, I mean, if there's particular areas that we're interested in that they are also have expertise in, they can identify funding opportunities. I just want to remind you that the Department of Transportation said in order to go for any kind of earmark, they need to be in the loop and basically buy into any project such as the Stone Pier. So we wouldn't even want to pursue that without, I mean, that would probably be in cooperation with the Department of Transportation.
And the engineering firm that we were working with.
Right.
That was going to be my point, actually. A couple of years ago, we looked into the possibilities of approaching Yarmouth with an upgrade to the Cousins Island Wharf ramp and float system. We thought that there was some DOT money available. There actually was some DOT money available. DOT told Don and Damon point blank, just exactly what Carol just said. We need to be brought along. This needs to be something that we believe is ready to implement, and there's going to be some requirements for the actual design.
Jen, do you have something?
Just that, it's confusing to me to know what are the steps, you know? I feel like everybody's kind of saying a little of the same and a little bit of different things. And we've talked in, several meetings about the need to have grants for the amount of big projects we want to have coming up, whether it's the Stone Pier, a new town office, changes at Bennett's. I mean, there's a long list of hopeful things. So do we have a subcommittee put that list together? And then, I mean, I'm just confused about when do you actually get a grant writer on board to look at those ideas? I mean, are we too early? Is it just at the right time? So that's what I'm more confused.
Carol?
I think that's a good question, and I think there is a lot of bipartisan infrastructure money coming out. But some of it's over a 10-year period. I think our first step is to look at our capital projects, identify those which we think would be good opportunities for seeking funding. And obviously, for example, the facilities committee is working on that. I think that's a project that probably could, get some money. The fire department's ongoing expenses is something that there are a number of grant programs that are pretty well accessed by many communities, not us. And so that's another one. So I think it's to start maybe with our capital improvement, our capital list and look at that and see, you know, because we only have so much energy here, and I think we should focus on the ones that would be most beneficial financially to the community, like broadband. I mean, that was a, you know, huge grant, and that's a big win. And the stone pier will be a big one, but that's gonna take a lot of coordination. I think the town facilities is one that would really be worth pursuing. And the fire department, only because they're relatively easy to get. There are other grant programs that will be coming out, but I think, then there are also the grants that the community goes after, like we've done with the climate resiliency grant and ship and harbor grant. And those are people in the community that apply for those, you know, or provide free of charge to the community, the grant application. So I think we can still rely on that to some extent, but I think we need a list of projects that we would like grants for and prioritize them more from a financial standpoint.
Well, I'm not in disagreement with that. My only thing is, we don't. I agree that we need projects lined up to do the grant research. My thought was that we would bring these and either interview these people and have them essentially in our back pocket. So if we know this Bill is, all he does is wharf grants or whatever, that's all he does. So he would be the one to go to research those wharf grants, and he would probably know readily what was available and everything. Ann is the one that does the fire department or anything like that, you know, so that's what I'm kind of looking at. Something, have a grant writer or somebody that knows those specific topics that are gonna be that we need, so, but up to you guys, we'll go with whichever way. We keep bringing up needing a grant writer, and now that we got a list of grant writers, you guys want us to hold off
Well,
until we have a specific thing to go to. And I thought we were leaning towards trying to find somebody, not necessarily to use them all the time, but to have them just
there's no harm in going through a process to pick a preferred provider or something, if you want to do that. There's no cost associated with that, but even before we get to, I mean, we do have to figure out how we're gonna pay for this. And it's nothing in the budget for 24 for this, right?
No, there isn't, but we would determine on what if he says, I strictly work on my percentage, you know, so. Just call it, you know,
The town does have a grant matching reserve account, so there's always thought maybe to change the language of that, so it's, you know, grant matching / consulting, so then that money could be tapped into if needed, if you don't know how or when you'd be budgeting for that.
Well, I think the cost of the grant writer should come out of that project budget.
Is that how it usually works?
I don't think we should have a separate budget for grant writing. I think we should become knowledgeable in how to connect with the appropriate grant writer for the appropriate for each project. But the cost of that grant writer services should be borne by that project. It's part of the cost of that project. And the hope is that we spend $10,000 and get $1 million, but you know.
I certainly don't see any harm in finding out how much they charge, how they charge, what the usual agreement is. But without being insensitive, we're spinning in the water here at the moment, so maybe we could move along at some point. I'll table it.
all right, where do we go from here?
I think you can either, I think rather than go through an RFQ process, you know, somebody can contact these grant writers and ask them exactly those questions that Mark just described.
I would just suggest that the town administrator just contact them, and ask them general questions about how they charge, what the usual agreement it looks like, and what we might expect if we decide to ask for possible engagement of their services.
You got that, you need to repeat.
Vika, let me know if you need help with work.
All right, everybody's in agreement with that? All right, Michael?
Yeah, I'll just add to Mark's list, what their particular area of expertise is.
Yeah. Area expertise. Thank you. All right, anybody else? All right, moving on, thank you. 23-020 to discuss harbor master shellfish board position and take any necessary action. So we had a meeting with Coastal Waters and the Shellfish Committee last Thursday. And
Job description.
okay, and we went through the job description. The Coastal Waters already went through it. So you, I don't know if you guys both have it. You have it.
There's a copy of it, that's what I gave you.
Thanks. You have it, Jen?
That's the copy with the marked up version from Coastal Waters.
Oh, so this is the same. You have it?
No.
Double sided.
Oh, I had it.
Do you guys have it? Okay. Jen? Double sided.
Where did this? That's a general one from me, municipal. That was this one from me, is that the one from me? Municipal?
So based on the talk at the meeting, we decided to keep the job as a hourly paid job and look at and stop me if I misspeak, to relook at the job description and separate the job description from harbor master and shellfish, make it two separate entities. So did you guys have a chance to look at the corrections that they made to the job description? And have any comments? Carol?
Well, I'm a little confused because this still says harbor master shellfish. And so I thought at the meeting, the decision was to separate them.
You did this before.
This
that-
is a
that
copy
meeting.
of the marked changes that Coastal Waters had when they brought this to me.
This isn't
Yeah,
perfect.
this is from December.
Right, so why are we looking at this? If,
I don't know, it's just, but it was from December based on before there were any.
Right. But as the meeting last week, we decided, does Coastal Waters agree with separating the positions or
We
not?
haven't, I mean, it was. Yeah,
Haven't talked about it, okay.
I mean, we talked about it, but I don't think that's.
Right,
But on the table, you have, this is what we made, this one that Jen Valeska made in the fall. And then there's an ordinance, if you look through them, they're all pretty close.
And plus, I wanted to put it on this agenda to just let the public know that
Okay.
what our discussion was about. Bob?
Under the assumption that we were splitting them, I spent a little bit of time with the pro forma that Jen had put together last fall, marking it up after what I took away from that meeting the other day as to what the responsibilities would be after that conversation. And then I tried assigning hours to that in terms of fall versus winter versus summer. And then put a rate against those hours that I came up with, and I came up with a budget number. It's a rough draft, but I'm willing to, I've got copies of that to share. If you guys want to read it, we can talk about it at our next budget meeting, if that's appropriate. I think our direction should be to follow through on splitting it into 2 positions. And I think the work we need to do is to figure out what is the list of responsibilities, what is the list of equipment, what is the hourly rate, how many hours will it take to achieve those responsibilities with that equipment? And then what does that translate into at an hourly rate times those hours?
Okay. When is, Justin, when is your next meeting, or when do you plan on having the next meeting?
Whenever I can, troops.
Hold on. I think we have a meeting on the, that's the budget one, right?
Yes, it's the 4th draft. April 5th is the 4th draft of the budget.
Is it possible your committee can meet before then? And go through the details that Bob is gonna present you? And then come up with a suggestion or yay or nay on it?
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's at all possible,
Yeah.
then Bob, if you can distribute that to us also, that'd be great. All right. Carol, then Jen.
Yeah, and I guess what I heard from Coastal Waters is, I mean, I kind of feel like Coastal Waters should really weigh in on how they see the split of the positions and the duties of the 2 positions. And I had a sense, but I had to leave the meeting early, of what I thought the sort of general consensus was. I think I would ask, Bob can send his suggestions to Coastal Waters and have them come back. I don't know if they have to meet in person or if they can just do it by email. I mean, but it seems like their thoughts on it are pretty, valuable.
I think it'd be better if we met.
Yep.
I think for the benefit of transparency, I think it's important if you're as a committee making decisions that you're gonna recommend for changes to me, or even if you do a Zoom and then you can record it.
We'll shoot for the 30th.
Jen?
I was just gonna recommend that, or suggestion that maybe Justin, Bob and I get together, talk about, because we all have the gist of how the meeting went, and then give Justin that information to take back to Coastal Waters that then can be presented at our next meeting that, is time permitted.
I'm fine with that.
Sounds good.
Mark?
Are we asking Coastal Waters and or Shellfish to weigh in on the wages? Or are we asking them to weigh in on the position and the duties?
Yeah.
All of the above. Because if you have a recommendation for wages, did you say you have it right now?
I just grabbed, no, I don't have a recommendation. And then I didn't,
Oh,
I'm thinking this is a budget. Simply said the process should be how many hours we need times an hourly rate equals the budget.
We tried to get to that point, I think, last Thursday, and I don't think we got very far at all, in my opinion.
We got a number from
You didn't get
you.
far, but when I looked at the numbers from what you had recommended, because you're the only one that made those number
I
recommendations.
was trying to move something forward.
Yeah, your recommendation was about 7,000 off on the harbor master from what it is now.
Yeah, my only point to what I'm saying is, well, it may not be my only point, but my main point to what I'm saying is, at the next budget meeting, I don't want to get bogged down. Our job at a budget meeting is to do budget numbers and project them and send them to the people for consideration of a total budget. So I want to have as much prep work done before that budget meeting as possible, because we tend to get bogged down with minutia at a budget meeting. And that's not what a budget meeting is. A budget meeting should not be talking about job duties, responsibilities, what the job should be. It should be saying, do we want to recommend the funding at this level? but do we want to recommend it at a different level? Right now, we have a level recommended of part-time wages at $6,000 down from 24,000. I'm just reminding the board that, not scolding you. I'm just saying I want to be prepared for the meeting and I want to be efficient with the meeting. Thank you.
So I think it's a regular board of selectmen meeting. If I'm
Well-
correct. So I think if we make an agenda item, to first discuss that, and we'll move on to the budget and adjust the numbers then.
Yeah,
And not spend any more time talking about it during the budget time.
yeah.
Bob first, then Gary.
Just a quick point. I think what we were trying to accomplish at that joint meeting of all three of those committees was to get input. I don't think we can expect to make a decision with that many people in the room, get everybody on the same page. I just don't think that's ever gonna happen. I think we got a lot of good input, but I think it's this board's responsibility to make a decision about the wage and the job description.
That's my point without offending the subcommittee.
Yeah, go ahead.
Carol?
Yeah, and I would just ask when you put the agenda together that you consider kind of putting the issues where people are attending the meeting to, you know, like coastal waters, you know, at the top. So they don't have to sit for an hour and a half, 2 hours, you know, waiting to speak. I just would prioritize the things that, you know, people are weighing in on. Some people like John just want to hang out, but not everybody.
But I like a full room when I talk, that's why. All right, good point.
And so, you know, yeah, okay. So maybe we could go to the pole attachment agreement after the harbor master so that we can get to those guys. Suggestion I'm making.
That's fine. Anything else? All right. All good? All right. So based on Carol's,
That's just me.
Carol's request,
I don't,
all in agreement of moving 23-022 out of order.
Fine with me. Sorry, we didn't do it sooner.
Apologize. So 23-022 to review pole attachment agreement between Central Maine Power and Shebig Island and take any necessary action.
So there has been some confusion with documents going back and forth. If you look at the document that I sent you, the comments that were made by CMP referenced language that said final version. The final version that they were referring to was the version that was sent to them that did not have the attorney's input in it. And so I think you can decide whatever you want to do, but I think the proper step would be to, and I haven't had a chance to do that between Monday and today, is to consolidate what they think was the final version with this version, because I noticed that they did not make comments in here. They made comments, but they didn't make any adjustments, just so that way, and then send it to them again, so then they see kind of the condensed document together.
I must be thick. I'm not. So the version we have that has, so first of all, the MM 21, MAB 22, R21, CN 23, R21, are those three different people or what? The version we have, I just don't understand what.
I guess you gotta clarify what you were just talking
So
about.
in the comments,
Yes.
is everybody, so the comments, it looks like there's MM, MAB, and
Yes.
CN. Who are those comments?
So one comment is going to be from a member of the committee.
MM is advocating for the committee. MAB is attorney.
The town attorney,
Okay,
and then
The other one, the CN is CMP.
CMP.
So the document we have has comments by the committee, or Adam, the town attorney, and CMP.
Correct.
And then what you're talking about is,
So Michael sent them a copy of the whole attachment agreement, and then I also received a copy of the full attachment agreement. I took that information and I forwarded to the town attorney. The town attorney made comments on it. CMP made comments in the copy that they had. Then it went to you guys, and your suggestion was, let's see what CMP has to say. Well, what CMP did is they made adjustments to that original document,
okay,
but only commented referring to the final version as the one that they had looked at, not the final version being the one with the attorney's comments.
okay,
And so I don't feel
Right.
comfortable signing it because
agreed.
it hasn't been consolidated, and that's like I had emailed you this information and said that, we were hoping to get it, and we did, but I just, in reading thoroughly through it, I discovered this, and I would feel more comfortable postponing it to the next agenda item so that, those agreements could kind of be combined with everybody's comments and adjustments, so then it's one document, and then CMP can look at it, and then it can come back to the town.
Yeah, so the process would be consolidate the comments,
Yes.
send it back to CMP
I
as sort of the final version.
Yes, because they're referring to the final version as one they looked at without the town's attorney's
which-
input, which it to me is not the final version.
Right,
The final
so-
version is them looking, and then he did comment on, but there are a couple of things in here, on page 3 where it says CMP removed this language from the
Right.
final version, so.
Right, so I agree. I guess, just in terms of process, you're gonna accept these comments, so to speak, in the document and then send it to CMP for their final approval?
Yes, and I would also feel more comfortable having the attorney take a look at it, just to make sure that the comments that CMP is removing are in the benefit of the.
Well, I would wait till we get, I'm not sure if they should do it simultaneously or rather in tandem, because what's the point if
Yep.
CMP has a hang up with something? Right. And there were a couple things, maybe it's not worthwhile bringing up now, given the situation, but,
Well, now would be the time before
Yeah,
it gets
because
all
if you have things that
revised.
need to be adjusted or
revised.
changed,
well, I don't know much about that. There was one where it said, that the insurance, let me see. So reserving, there were a couple comments, probably the one that stuck out to me was, so CMP is I wasn't sure who was commenting, so it was a little hard to follow. There was one where there was the inconsistencies with the main code. And then they,
Where are you?
so, yeah, on page, there's a couple of them. One is on page 6. Under 3.3.3.
Yeah.
So the first comment, which I take is the committee, Adam,
Mhm, yeah.
saying it's inconsistent with the law or whatever, then agreed if the criteria must be met, also provided, I just don't quite understand how that comment's been resolved.
I can tell you what the whole thing is. The big question is who's gonna pay for make ready, which is what they have to do, any who wires are already on.
Right.
For your wires, okay? And the state law says that it's a municipal system intended to serve an unserved population. The whole owner has to pay for their own make ready work, not the town. So that's in the, both in the law and in the 880, chapter 880 of the PUC rule, which is what they operate under. Covers this.
And is CMP in agreement with that?
Yes, they are.
Okay,
That's in the second, the third whereas in the beginning. Is the key part.
okay.
So whereas licensor or licensee intend to abide by the Open Public Utilities Commission chapter 88 rules, where terms of this agreement conflict with chapter 88, licensor or licensee agree to follow chapter 80 rules. Now, that's not perfect, because if consolidated or somebody appeals to the courts and they throw out that statute, then we would be liable for those ready costs if CFP wanted to pursue. But it's the best way. You don't have any leverage. It's not like a negotiation where you buy it or don't buy it. They own the poles, and if they say you can't put your cable on, stop. So we did succeed in getting that language, which was a big victory, my way.
So you're of the opinion that CMPs agreed to pay the cost?
Yes.
Okay, and honestly, that wasn't 100% clear to me reading this thing, but
Yeah,
that goes to
So that's,
show.
that's what, yeah, that's what their guy is admitted that too, said, yeah.
Then there was a question about insurance, and I'll see if I can find, there was something about we need to hear from our insurance person. I thought it was a town comment, so I was wondering where that stands.
Question about insurance.
Oh, so page 21. Reserving rights in this section for our insurance carrier to comment. So where does that stand?
That's.
Under article, whatever that
Yeah,
is, 14.
That's moved to the town of Somerville challenged that homeowners acquire a $5 million liability policy, which is in excess of the town normally has, it's covered by tort claims and it's somewhere around $400,000. And the town of Somerville went to the PUC and tried to persuade them, since they weren't doing the actual work, and saying they won't be doing the actual work, that we shouldn't have to carry that kind of insurance. And CMP brought to that discussion some pretty cogent arguments that then Somerville's insurance people agreed were right, that there were risks that Axiom's insurance, which Axiom wasn't, wouldn't cover. So that if they felt the necessity to be covered to that level, we would have to have that kind of insurance. And we do, and we did go and get a liability policy, excess liability policy. Costs about $10,000 a year, and Axiom's going to pay for it. As soon as they start operating as part of the franchise.
So the language, so first of all, we have to have the insurance to, I mean, are we covering accidents with our insurance?
No, it's covering.
It's kind of like catastrophic insurance in case Axiom,
Well,
and why,
Axiom has the same insurance, but everybody involved has to have that.
so why isn't Axiom insurance enough? I shouldn't.
That's over my finger.
Okay, but this, so in terms of this agreement, this comment says, our insurance carrier has to comment. So has this changed or is this the same? Or
Well, that hasn't changed. It should, that comment should be deleted.
All the
Okay.
comments stayed in here without any changes.
Okay,
The quickest way to answer that is because it's town equipment, town is responsible for carrying the insurance to cover it.
okay, that makes sense
So
to
there were a
me.
number of possibilities that were put in that statement of response that if Axiom took bankrupt or if we get a new franchisee or something, we still own
Oh,
the.
and the hardware, right, okay.
So you're basically recommending to us to consolidate all of these into one final draft.
Yes,
Make sure that our town attorney is comfortable with that from our position. Resubmit it to CMP and then revisit it.
I would resubmit it to CMP first, just because the CMP needs to be okay with the comments, with the with all of it included, and then if they're okay with it, then, send it the attorney, but it's really, I think that if it's consolidated and they take a look at it and they're okay with it and you're okay with it, I think it's good to go through unless there's something questionable out of that. I haven't gone through all the different sections where they said, look at the final version, because the final version isn't red marked, so I have to go kind of line by line and make sure that there isn't anything. And the way that it is right now with the discoveries that I discovered reading through it yesterday afternoon, I don't feel comfortable recommending you sign it.
And the high level version of this is an agreement for us to use the poles for
Yeah.
CMP, for our fiber, which the town owns, Axiom will install, and CMP is gonna pay. I mean, or we don't have to pay CMP, is that, I mean,
We have
what's,
to pay the license fees.
right? And,
We don't have to pay them for any work that has to be done to move the.
Make
cables
ready.
already there.
right, to make ready, and so there's a section in here about, determining whether the poles are adequate.
Yeah.
And so if they're not adequate, CMP will make them adequate.
But we have to pay for that determination. But we have to pay their survey costs.
Engineering.
But and if the poles some poles are not adequate, they would bring them up to speed? Okay, and that's at their cost.
As far as I know, we do have something in the budget for pole replacement,
Okay,
but,
and,
we have these costs in the budget, we just don't want to spend them.
and the cost for this license agreement, what is that about? Do we know?
I'm sorry.
The license agreement cost, what is it? For the pole license for the town?
Oh, there's a license for each pole that costs like $8 a pole or something like that. There's some, it's in there, but it's not big. The big thing is the make ready cost, and that for the whole project is in the area of $300,000.
Okay,
So that's the issue that we're
okay,
trying to knock.
we don't want that.
It doesn't seem to be an issue with CMP, but with consolidating is going to be an issue. And we're probably going to recommend putting the amount in escrow until the whole thing's decided, so we can go forward with the project. But that's for another day.
Okay,
All right. So where we stand is, the town administrator will consolidate the CMP and the original and whatever notes there are, and then send it to CMP.
So CMP has seen the list with the agreement with the committee's comments and the lawyer's comments. This was their response. I think their response didn't take the form anymore. But they're happy with it, but I think it's a question of form of response rather than just do the language.
I don't know, for me, I'd feel more comfortable if they were looking at one instead of comparing 2 or 3 pieces of paper to try to decipher it.
I agree.
That's my thought anyway.
yeah, I agree.
So that's where we're standing, and then she brings it back to us or sends it to the lawyer to reproof it.
I'll probably plan on bringing it back for the next meeting.
Sorry, it's process taking so long, but we need to make it right.
Yeah, sure.
All right, any other comments on this? Anything from the public? All right, thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, moving back to 23-021, consider assigning 2 BOS members and TA to discuss possible shared municipal job description. So this was brought up at the last meeting to appoint 2 board of selectmen with the town administrators, start to talk with Long about some possible shared.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
I had no idea I thought you meant in the town. I didn't realize you mean externally. Okay,
External. Sorry.
now I get it.
So to talk to Long essentially about sharing some duties or municipal appointments or something. So there's a suggestion. Who would like to go do that? And I just mentioned Long also, you know, we have Cliff, we have,
Or
you
Yarmouth,
know, several different islands around, so.
And I had talked with Brian, did he call you recently, the town administrator for Long Island? I mean, in the last week, because I had talked with him about something else, and he said he was gonna give you a call. I think their town meeting is before ours.
Yeah, they're usually, I believe, like a month ahead of us. I think it's in
So
May sometime.
he said he was still interested. Their code enforcement situation is kind of similar to ours, so I think that's definitely on. He wasn't very encouraging though. And I'm trying
He
to,
wasn't very encouraging.
well, I mean, he just said they're hard to find.
Oh,
And what was the other position? There was something else.
harbor master.
Yeah, he didn't mention that, but yeah. So anyway, I think it's a good idea. Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to be sure. I didn't know what you meant. And I guess we had left it last time that we would, the two boards would meet. And have you decided not to do that?
I haven't heard back.
I mean, there's only 3 of them, select board.
Okay.
I reached out to him and let him know, and he said he was gonna get back with some, you know, information closer toward spring. And then we had communicated with a couple of basic questions back and forth, but there wasn't really definitive follow-up on it.
Well, I'm wondering if maybe not a Zoom meeting between the 2 boards might be more practical.
Okay, right.
That's what I'm thinking too. I don't wanna make it sound like there might not be able to be good discussions and possibilities, but we've got our plate full at the moment, so I think maybe at some point, a Zoom between the 2 town administrators and the 2 boards, realizing that it's accessible to the public, of course, if they want to join in to see what initial discussions, and then maybe from that, maybe
Right.
we take a closer look at it.
Right.
So my view is the other way around. Have a small subcommittee, start the talks. And then, once we have a decision, bring the boards together and then talk.
Well, my recollection is we said the next step was for the boards. So Vika and I met with the town administrator and Donovan, who's the head selectman. And the way we left it was that we would meet as 2 boards. And I think if we do it remotely, it's pretty, you know, reasonable. I think we have to evaluate, I don't remember when their town meeting is, but, you know, they have a very part-time town administrator and they do have a finance committee, but they're probably in the thick of it right now. So it might be after that.
Paul?
I think we could kind of do both. A quorum of this board is 3. So we had a Zoom meeting with their board and our board. And if at least 3 of this group could attend along with Vika, just to have a quick meeting on the topic of shared resources, the way we described it here. I think that is 1 more person than 2 going over there, but probably more efficient, and it does honor the fact that we've already kind of had that first conversation. So now I would propose doing it sooner as opposed to later, because I think they may be in a similar situation as we are on a couple fronts.
So you're not suggesting a Zoom meeting?
I am suggesting a Zoom meeting instead of 2 people plus Vika going
Oh,
over for a
okay.
meeting. I'm saying let's set up a Zoom meeting, but everybody doesn't have to be there. As long as 3 of us are there, it's a quorum.
Yeah, okay. I'd be concerned about their availability. I think they might not have any time right now.
All right. So, bless you, by the way. The other, so
Okay, I'm fine with that. So we'll say, have TA get with with Long and set up a meeting via Zoom. And get their availability, and we'll bounce around dates. Do you want to use the time now to see about if we want to get on the same page as far as which jobs we want to talk about? Because I know the code enforcement officer job has been talked about, harbor master,
Waste costs,
Waste
waste
costs.
transportation disposal.
Yeah, to me, the three possible subjects, at least to start out, might be code enforcement, might be harbor master, might be difficulties of managing
Waste.
solid waste, transfer station issues.
parties.
Yeah, that goes with it, yeah.
Anything else? You think of? It's a good start. Jen, you have something? All right. So, we can hear back from you all. All right.
Oh, I do have one thing.
Yep.
I've been continually looking at the clock and thinking, man, we're in really good shape, until I realized it's an hour out.
Yeah. So, not too bad.
Yeah.
All right, communications. Any communications?
The communication that I have was what you forwarded me about, the custom quotes.
Yep.
Do you wanna
Yeah.
elaborate on
Print it
that
off.
since you have the,
So I called Custom Floats and asked them about looking at, I described what was going on with the pilings and stuff. He went down there and looked at it and decided that was a little over his scope, so they hire out for certain specific jobs.
Talking about a cousin?
Custom float, yeah, for cousins, those three pilings.
Yeah.
The issue with separating and stuff, so he sent me, he's got a subcontractor that he hires to do that stuff.
When you say do that stuff, what do you mean? Like put a
So-
band around it?
I'll read you
Oh,
the
okay.
exact, I do apologize, I didn't send this to everybody, but if it comes up. All right. So I talked to the gentleman, he went down there and he goes, yeah, that one's pretty bad, it's pretty loose and everything. And I go, so you looked at that last one, what did you think about the first one? And he's like, I didn't even look at the second one, I looked at the first one, he's like, I'll go back and look at the second one. He thought the first one looked pretty bad too.
So is the second one the one that they
The,
potentially
correct, yeah.
fixed?
So, they call it green heart, I guess. So 2 green heart, 3 pylon clusters need to be repaired. These pylon clusters hold the floating dock in place on the Yarmouth side where the ferry picks up passengers. So, bolts have loosened and bolts have pulled into a split in plumb pilings. We propose that the plumb pilings both need to be tightened with stainless steel banding around them to stop pilings from splitting any further. Adding large steel pipe washers on the galvanized bolts where they connect to the plumb piling and batter piling. Adding galvanized steel cable wrapped around both piling clusters to also hold the pilings together. Estimated cost, $4,475
For how many?
to repair both of those piling clusters down there.
Who's the subcontractor? With the contract, right?
JW Hale Marine.
Marine JW Hale.
That's Roger Hale.
Oh, really?
So I mean, so that's the proposal I got.
Do we have money in the budget?
We have the floats and ramps.
Is there money available in that line?
It's a capital.
Yeah, so there is, Public Works has a contractor's line which has $4,000, which, some has been expended. So the bill could be split where, half of it comes out of that, and then the floats and ramps, there's, $27,825 in there, so that would be the fastest, the rest.
So basically, we need this fixed. He said he wouldn't be able to do it for like a month or so. He's extremely busy, going all over the place. So once we get the bill, the invoice, then we can make a motion to take out the money out of either the capital or spend it.
Yeah, I would recommend doing 2,000 out of the budget and then pay for the rest of it.
Out of capital. Yeah, so we'll do that motion when we get the invoice. Bob first, and then Sarah.
I was gonna make a motion, but Carol might still have discussion.
Well, I guess, is there any alternative? It seems like there's no real option, right?
Yeah. Have to have it fixed.
Right.
Again, if I may, it's not my area of specialty by any stretch of the imagination, but I was looking at it the other day over there when I finally left the island and went to town. And the furthest one's really moving now. The one closer to the wharf, they all work, they work. So I think this is something that we just have to do
Right.
to keep it together. Because if we get a massive storm and that one lets go, that float could shift. We don't want that for safety of that vessel and the rescue especially, but even kids or commuters or anybody.
And the cost that if it shifts, it's gonna tear stuff up.
So I hate that it's, that amount of money just to strap those things together, but I think that's just what we have to do. So this is no brainer for me.
Yeah, he told me he's got to bring a specific barge in to do it. the work off of and stuff. Yeah, it's, yeah.
He's the same guy that did the little repair on the stonework as you drive down to the right.
All right.
Same
yeah,
company.
yeah. Top
4575 was the amount?
40,
4475.
yeah. We can't make a motion
Yeah,
for
we don't.
communications right now.
Right.
Oh,
So it has to be an agenda item when we get the invoice. So,
okay.
Well, we could make a motion, just wasn't on the agenda.
yeah,
I could defend this one easily.
it's up to you guys. Go ahead, Bob.
It brings up a point. I know we used to have an agenda item that said, and any other such business or something like that.
Other business.
Other business. I think we should go back to doing that. I would go ahead and make a motion that we move forward with that repair and that the money come partially out of the maintenance line.
Can I just make a suggestion? To simplify, can you just make a motion to authorize me to sign this contract? Because then I'll have to bring you the invoice anyways.
Yeah, that's the simplest way.
Make a motion that
Second.
we authorize Vika to sign that contract for the repairs of the 2 sets of pilings on the land side at Coven Boat.
All right.
Second.
Any other more discussion? All right, all in favor? All right. Thank you for that. All right. The other communication it's communication I want from you guys. I brought you information last meeting for the tractor for the town. I brought you 3.
Yep.
We kind of about the New Holland Beauregard quote. We didn't really come to a decision if we should move forward with that. Basically, let the company know we're interested in this tractor, and we move forward on this, because we have the money in there that we can potentially buy the tractor right now. And then maybe after the next budget season, buy the implement. Or, whatever we can buy now and then buy the implement. after, so. Just didn't know what you guys wanted to do with that. Do you guys want us to get in touch with Beauregard or a separate company? Then, okay.
I'm fine if your recommendation is the New Holland, which is going to have a flail mower.
Yep.
It's gonna be able to do a little bit of sweeping. And it's going to,
Gonna have a loader bucket, a sweeper, and the mower arm thing.
With a flail.
Yeah.
and when you said we have the money to buy it, I assume that means you're going to take the reserve fund that's available from last year's town meeting and supplement it for now with an extra 30,000 from.
Well, we can hold off on the implement.
So what I would do is I would bring that quote to you as an agenda item. You would authorize the TA to sign that contract, and then we would work with the company. I know the company in Augusta was willing to work with us where, you know, like to secure the tractor, it was we do 50% down and then do the other 50 on July 1st. So
Oh,
work with
that's sure.
them.
So-
But I think what Bo was implying is we do have, where is the 70 right around there, where the physical tractor, I think it was like 54,000 or something like that, that could be purchased now, and then after July 1st, the pieces, you know, the mower and whatever the other terminology, so to work with them to see what, you know, what they can do to.
I just
work
wanted,
with us.
you're okay to move forward talking to Beauregard about the New Holland tractor.
Sounds
And
like
then-
a good reconsideration.
All right, yeah,
So I just have to ask, is it just one of those apples and oranges things that you like Holland, but you ask certain people on the island, they're like, don't get a Holland, and
I have-
you know, the
I have
Beauregard likes
no
Kubota.
preference on any tractor. Tractors are not my forte, but we do associate, our two, Facos are from Beauregard.
That's the company we use to service equipment.
And
when it
they
has to
service
go
the
over.
equipment, props to them about service. They're really good with service.
That's important.
And I haven't had any complaints, and I haven't heard any complaints from Public Works about them either. So that's
All I looked at was, okay, we started with a John Deere quote, and then we got a higher quote and a higher quote. So I just was like, wait a minute, why are we doing that?
well, those higher quotes was because the sweepers were attached to it. The John Deere doesn't have a sweeper attachment to it. So
So they don't make a sweeper, John Deere?
they probably do, but it wasn't requested at the time. So I can call them and ask for a quote for that.
I think when I looked at it item by item, they look pretty similar in terms of per item cost overall. But having the dealer be closer, I thought was a plus, and having the dealer be the one that we already use was a plus. I've had personal experience with them, is very limited, and they've been very good for service. If the towns had good service with them as well, closer is better for something like that. So that's, I would say, my opinion would be to go ahead and go forward with the New Holland and try to work out the deal that makes the most sense in terms of paying part down, rest of it. And have Vicky come back with that.
This may be a stupid question, but is it one of those where we get it and then it has to go back over to get stuff put on it or do anything different to it?
We'd have to figure that out through discussion with them. I think the first step would be to bring them forward in front of you and you authorize.
So it might be, we don't need the tractor right now. They can hold on to the tractor. It'll be our tractor. Once they get the implement, they can put it on.
Yeah, you just want a commitment.
So
To
basically. a
secure
commitment.
the product.
Gotcha.
And the rest.
And I did ask Vika to check in with our Public Works as far as their opinion and stuff, but Chuck has had some personal issues going on, so wasn't able to give us information unless he touched base lately.
No, between him being gone and then the storm,
So,
I haven't had a chance to touch much more with him.
so Mark or Carol.
And I'm glad that we may be moving forward with a new tractor for mowing and sweeping, et cetera, purposes. But at some point, we do have to have conversation about some disposal of old equipment from that public works department. Where we get quite a collection going there, so we're gonna have to deal with that at some point.
All right, any other communications?
We had a communication today from Justin about
Oh, right.
the Fowler issue, and he was asking, so at the last meeting, 3-1, I heard that Bo was to speak with the CEO the following day to discuss moving forward and like an update.
So I did talk to the CEO, and his plan was to sit down with Vika and get some kind of something written up to give to Fowler as a response. As far as next steps, what's going on, so. Yes.
I would like to suggest that we include the town attorney, include Natalie in that conversation. She's had some pretty clear direction in terms of how that should be handled, and I don't think we followed that direction. There was a communication a while ago that said that Mr. Fowler had met his obligation by placing a phone call to the code officer. That was not what the email he said. The notice of violation said a written plan of action. So that was not met, and I'm just asking that we get in the habit of looking at these documents as legal documents that need to be followed as legal documents. So I would ask that Natalie be part of that conversation relative to what the next steps are.
Okay. So are you able to talk to Butler about you guys getting together? All right. Carol?
Yeah, and I guess it would be good for Vika or the code enforcement officer to send them, we should know what's going on, I guess. So, and if Natalie has an opinion, then that should be communicated to us. And I think we've got to understand that situation, it's kind of part of the larger picture on the island. And, we need to handle these appropriately. And I feel like I guess I can share that I've heard from some members of the community that are surprised that we have not been more proactive about dealing with some of these problems. And I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Bob?
This ties back to what we're talking about now. There were times when I was on the planning board that it seemed like there was this obvious solution. But I learned from Maine Municipal that a planning board cannot take the role of a planner.
Right.
A town planner is a separate role. Planning board is not allowed to go out and make recommendations to a homeowner or a business owner or whatever. But I think it's been a while since I read Vika's job description, but is planning part of your job description?
Technically,
Look at it specifically.
Yeah. So it's just something we might want to consider in the future. If there's a solution out there that's obvious that we're not allowed to talk about, I think as with planning being part of Vika's job description, we want to check with Maine Municipal and make sure it wasn't violating any statute. But as long as it's statutorily okay, then I think we could have a discussion with Vika, and then Vika could actually execute that role of planner to help resolve some of these situations. I think we all want to see this situation get resolved in a way that works for all the parties. But the 5 of us are not allowed to go out and make those recommendations. So just wanted to get that on the table. Then I have one other question. Is there a policy that dictates what communications get brought up in this part of our meeting and which ones don't?
Typically, if it's within a certain amount of time before the meeting, basically, I make the recommendation, or I choose to not do that certain communication. So like that Justin one, we didn't have enough time to put it or post it or anything. So it's kind of one of those things.
There were earlier conversations, communications from the Dowdies that never got reported out in communications. And I did hear from them verbally, their frustration that some communications did get read in this portion, others did not. That's why I was asking if there was a policy, what we include. And there, if we get 100 emails, do we refer to every one of them? If we get 6 phone calls, do we refer to every one of them? I'm not advocating that I'm saying, what is the policy and what is the procedure for reporting out such communication?
I don't think if you're asking something that specific, to my knowledge, I don't know if there's anything detailed enough.
Right.
I think that from what I've learned, being in this position and working under other two town administrators, it's on a need-no basis to share the communication with the selectmen. So for things that they're gonna hear in the community, things like that. And then, at times, make the discretion of knowing, when is it too early to share the communication, that you don't have enough information to fully share it. So I think that's, worth a clarification to make sure everyone understands what it is. But I mean, I struggle with sometimes knowing whether certain things need to be shared or certain things are just part of the day-to-day routine stuff.
I will say, when I first started being on the board, during communication, it was, we received a communication from, talking about this. That's all that
And
was
that
there.
was it, yeah. And then
And
if
then
you wanted
it
a
was-
discussion
and then it
about
was
it,
put
you
under-
put it on the agenda.
Yeah, correct, yeah, and then it was put under the pack online, so that, go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, and I don't see the downside of sharing the communications. And I didn't know what you mean, that there wasn't time for it to be posted, like Justin's communication. I mean,
No,
to
I didn't
me,
say-
we got a communication before the meeting that was pretty clear, and he has a stake in that situation, so it seems reasonable.
In our communication policy, there is specific like dates, like so many days before a meeting and things like
For
that.
a public communication to the Board of Selectmen?
I don't
So
know
let
if
me-
it's a public
so let-
communication, but for things to be discussed and presented in a public meeting. So there's that fair judgment to the people presented to the meeting, knowing when there is a clear cutoff to come fully prepared.
I understand that when it comes to things on the agenda, I personally would not apply that to an email communication with a question like that. And I think we sometimes give the community the impression that we are not addressing their concerns, which concerns me. So I just wanted to add that. And then specifically back to the Fowler thing, there was a 2-week deadline, and theoretically, we could have imposed fines after that, right? And have we decided as a board that we are not going to do that? Is that a board decision or a CEO decision? I
I
don't.
don't think we've discussed that. And I don't think we've discussed or clarified whose role that would be, but it
Right.
would likely be this body's.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Back to the communication thing, I would ask that we err on the side of over communication. And I like your format of just read the headers. And if there's 10 of them, just read the headers. But if I think we need to learn more about number 3, I can raise my hand and say, can you let me know what the detail is on that? And you might tell me the detail, and I might say, can you make that an agenda item? That's me.
Yeah.
I think we need to err pursuant to the kind of conversations that Carol's heard. We need to err on the side of over communication, and need to know is not, I feel like we need to know and we need to share as much information as we possibly can without violating statute.
Let me look at the communication policy. I'll get my words right, and I'll let you know what I mean. Mark?
I don't disagree with that at all. The only thing I'm a little concerned with is we tend to lose our efficiency at our meetings, and they tend to go 3 hours, and I'm not pointing the finger at you or the town administrator or any members of the board or all of us. I think we could get a little bit more efficient with how we conduct our meetings.
I understand. The other thing too is the communications are being more discussions than just a communication. So we need to be like, we got a communication from Justin.
Yep.
Whether we read the whole letter or it's on the thing, and that's it. We don't have a discussion about it. If we want to put it on a future agenda, we have the next couple items down, put to address the letter that we received or the communication we received. I think that would be a step to move.
Again, not to keep this inefficient, but this one's a little different where it's pending and it's been dragging. So this one probably deserves just what we said. Contact the code enforcement officer and getting this rolling a little bit better.
Yeah,
That's why I raised my hand to say those exact things, because this is something that has been going on and on. But I also feel it's important to respond to him. You do very well responding to different people and saying, you know, thank you, we'll discuss it or whatever. Well, now we've actually discussed it. There is a plan of what she's gonna do. It just takes a simple email to let them know that, you know, they're not forgotten, that we are doing our best to try to stay on top of this.
for all of us. All right.
Yep.
All right, anything else? Moving on. To approve minutes from February 15, 2023, February 25th, 2023, and March 1st, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All right, any questions or comments? Bob, you had written an email about some
I
corrections?
got that, yep, and I did make those corrections.
All right, and are you both, okay? All right, all in favor? Items to be placed on future agenda. So I have, the RFQ results for the, what comes from the meetings and stuff. Caps Road, Julie and Malconian Drain,
Can I, Caps Road, why is that on an agenda?
just future agenda. I'm not saying next week, I'm just saying in general,
Okay,
because we'll be talking to the owners or something's gonna happen. Not right off, but it just between the lawyer or the easements or something. It's just a project. The other thing that I had was South Shore Drive and East Shore Drive. Those issues of the land erosion. Whether the board wants to pursue talking to them or what we're gonna do, because they're gonna potentially impact our road.
So to discuss whether we want to approach the landowners about possible solutions that might involve abandonment of their property there.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
I would agree, that's a future agenda item. I've got one more.
All right,
From the February 15 meetings, item 23-008, we said after a discussion, it was decided to put this item on the next agenda, so the board can see the Port City drawings. I know we don't have the Port City drawings yet, but it should be on the list of future agenda items,
okay.
relative to the electrical upgrade in particular. That's still hanging out there as a long lead time item that we've got exposure on.
Yeah. I know we're, the facility committee is gonna have 21st.
Next
Anyway.
Tuesday.
They're coming up, yeah.
So. All right.
I think the final pull agreement, because we have to act on that, right?
Yeah, so for next week, for the next meeting, it would be the full agreement, the harbor master job description, the mirror guard quote, and the RFQ,
So the next meeting is a regular meeting.
and then a budget work.
So we'll look at those agenda items and try to,
And I guess
You try to-
I guess I'd like an update on the Fowler situation at the next meeting.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I don't have my schedule with me. So the next selectmen's meeting is before our fourth draft of the budget.
Yeah, that's what I was trying
The
to.
next meeting is scheduled for
Oh, same meeting.
Wednesday, April 5th, and it's a Board of Selectmen meeting, and then a fourth draft budget.
So it's
Thank you.
both.
Yeah.
And that's April 5th?
Yes.
Anything else? Do we want to put in the discussion about the LD 2003 or something like that?
I don't think we
Ordinance or
need,
something? I don't,
nope,
okay, yeah, I brought it up, that's why I was just curious if you wanted a discussion on it.
well, it's for the planning board, it may need to deal with it. I think the only time critical item is this public hearing, because John seemed unaware of that, and he can't go directly to the warrant, it has to be a public hearing.
Okay.
I'd like to make a suggestion. Are we saying that this next meeting is a combination of
Yeah.
business and budget? Then I would keep this agenda as.
Everything we're saying right now is not gonna go on the agenda,
Yeah.
but
Do you want to see more time that you do want to see on that?
I think, the
Because
art,
right now you have the harbor master job description, which goes to the top of the priority, the pool license agreement,
Yeah,
the Fowler update, the stone wharf RFQ. I mean, your part is really the only thing that you could scratch, but those all seem like
well, we also need a, a financial report, since we haven't seen one since February. Yeah,
so I think the RFQ can
yeah,
wait.
so this agenda
Yeah.
item will also have all of the updates from the
Yeah.
departments.
I don't mean to harp on efficiency, but sometimes we tend to bite off more than we can chew.
So is there really a reason why we have to do those reports this week?
yeah, we could skip all of those.
I just,
Well, we.
I don't
The
remember any
practice is
reason.
putting them on the first meeting of the month, so I've just been trying to be consistent with that.
Yeah.
But I could skip it and.
Do you
hold
think-
on.
Do you think you'll have a treasurer's report by, I mean, I'm a little concerned about that one.
As long as we get that
Where did
almost
these come?
complete, and then
Those get them out first.
I don't care about the other reports
Can you
myself.
pass them down?
I mean, we can have
I'm fine.
the reports in
Thank
the
you.
packet, doesn't mean we have to discuss it, which we haven't been usually anyway. So we've couple questions, but, not major, so. So it's up to you guys. We'll put the treasurer report in. But the other reports, we can either have them with this one or move it to the next meeting.
Well, you can give us a report, I mean, just not talk about them at all.
That's up to you.
Include them in the packet, and if you need to talk about any of them in great detail, we can talk about it.
Go outside so we can't hear you.
What worries me is it's like 4 weeks, 3 weeks away, a lot can go on between now and then.
I think we need to strive to keep that business part of that meeting as short as we can.
All right, anything else that you guys?
And just
Like
one,
on a future-
are we getting another draft of the budget in
Yes.
this? And will it include a school budget?
No. Unless it's done and then they get it to us, but I doubt it. Usually typically it's the fifth draft or the.
It will
we
have
get it with the
anything
school
in it with the updates from the last meeting.
Could I make a quick request? Could you and Vika talk with Ann and the chairperson, is that Jeff Putnam?
Yes.
And come up with a conclusion about how you would like that combined budget meeting to go. Just let us know. Thank you.
So just for their purposes, that what I heard the last meeting that we had with the school, it started out that we were there just solely for the school, and ended up the school committee asking us about our budget. So it switched over to our budget, then we were going through our budget with them. So, and people were like, wait a second, we were just here to talk about the school. We didn't know we were asking questions about all sorts of other items. So that's where the conversation is.
A lot of people said if they wanted to talk to you about your budget, they should have came during your budget meeting and talked to you about your budget, not during the school
I
meeting.
know, but they requested to do that, so I left.
So that's,
I didn't see the,
that's what I got. So that's all.
that's fine.
So I don't personally care either way. I just wanted it posted right. That's all.
I just want to make sure we run it well and people get out of it what we want, including the public.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make a suggestion of how, just in observance being on both sides, how it might have kind of gone off the rails last time. So I know it's, the school is part of the town and, all that other stuff, but I think it's really important, they're working just as hard as we are to try to keep their budget under wraps, and instead of, I think it's just a nice way to welcome them, have them sit around a table, and they were all set to present their budget last year. And instead, we went about it of just hammering them with questions. And so I think what happened was that then they felt on the defense and started hammering us with questions. And I don't think that's necessary. I think that if they're here to present their budget, let's sit around a round table, let's talk, let's let them explain things. If we have any questions after they've gone through their budget, we can ask the questions. And then we can say, do you have any questions for us? And then let them, I don't think we should get offended for them asking questions to us.
So do you want me to, the reason I'm asking, is do you want me to post it as a joint meeting with the school committee to look at
It's a joint
school
budget
and
meeting.
School, so a joint budget meeting.
That's the way I see
Joint
it.
budget meeting. That way encompasses all of it. That's all I care about. I don't
And
care.
in my opinion, this just goes back to the fact that it's time to talk about whether we need a separate budget committee in this community.
Yeah.
I think it can be handled better by a group of people that are financially minded. The selectmen and the school board are still going to have to take ownership of why this is getting presented to the budget committee. But this goes back to efficiency and focus. And this board, we're all trying really hard, but we're not a budget committee. We have business to run for the town, for the people. And so, to me, it just goes back to the fact that, there was no harm intended from either side, I don't think. Just clarify how we think it should go, just so we know.
And personally, I would welcome at least a short presentation by them before we talk about the details.
Okay.
I think that was Jen's point, maybe we didn't give them enough time to do that.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? All right. Moving on, if I can find my agenda.
I move that we go into executive session pursuant to MRSA 456A personnel to discuss two applicants for the facilities committee, take any action out of executive session, and to hold a review of the town administrator position.
Second.
Thanks, Dan.
Any discussion on that? All right, all in favor?